Today is my birthday, and I thought it would be the perfect time to sit down and share a process I really enjoy: oil painting. It's not just the medium I find so fascinating, but the way it lets me slow down and really immerse myself in the work. Unlike my usual charcoal drawings, which I also love, oil painting feels like a whole different world. It's colourful, it's more tactile, and it's incredibly satisfying. The colours blend and build up layer by layer, and I can really control the process. I'm going to walk you through how I approach it, and I promise it's not as complicated as it might seem. Now, when I'm starting a painting, especially a portrait like the one you see here, I start with the basics, but I don't rush through it. The first layer is crucial. It's where I build the foundation, so I take my time with it. For this portrait, I'm using only a few colours: red, blue, yellow, white, and earth colours like burnt umber and burnt sienna. I prefer to pre-mix my colours ahead of time so I know exactly what I'm working with. When it comes to mixing my skin tones, I always start with burnt sienna and white. Burnt sienna mixed with white gives me the perfect foundation for a nice, natural lighter skin tone. I find it's a great base because it has a balanced warmth to it, making it ideal for skin tones without being too vibrant or flat. If I feel that the mix leans a bit too much towards yellow, I can easily tweak it by adding just a touch of red. This helps to warm it up and give it a more lifelike, flushed tone. On the other hand, if I want to cool it down or make it a little paler, I simply add a little bit of blue. It's amazing how just a small amount can alter the colour to suit the mood or the lighting of the piece. The beauty of using burnt sienna is that it's such a versatile colour. It's easy to control and allows me to build the exact skin tone I need without a lot of complexity. What I love most is how adaptable it is, making the whole process of creating a skin tone feel straightforward and intuitive. To create lighter values, I just add more white, simple as that. For the darkest darks, I mix burnt umber, blue, and a touch of red. The exact type of red, blue, or yellow doesn't really matter for portraits, since we almost always tone down the colours anyway. You rarely need anything too vibrant. That said, I personally use red medium, lemon yellow, and ultramarine blue from Rembrandt, but honestly, any brand or variation would work just fine. As you can see here, I start in one area, usually the eye. For me, the eye is the most important part of a portrait. It's where I want to place the most focus. I apply a very thin layer of paint and really take the time to spread it evenly with my brush. There's a common rule in oil painting: thick over thin. That means your first layer should be thin, and then you can either continue painting thinly or gradually build up to thicker layers. But you shouldn't do it the other way around. Applying a thick layer first, and then layering something thinner over it is said to increase the risk of cracking. Personally, I've never had that problem. One of my oldest oil paintings, done about 15 years ago, still looks perfectly fine. So I know my approach works. The key is in keeping the layers thin. As for medium, my go-to medium is liquin. It speeds up the drying process significantly. Without it, lighter areas might take up to a week to dry. But with liquin, I usually only need to wait overnight, which is ideal for working in layers. In this section here, my painting actually looks a bit too yellow at the moment, so I decided to pre-mix another set of colours, this time making it slightly warmer. When using the indirect painting method or layering technique, it's perfectly fine to start the second layer on one part of the painting even if the rest isn't finished yet. In this case, the face gets a bit of a head start, which I think is a good thing. The more layers it receives, the smoother and more refined it will look in the end. Once the eye is done, I move on to the nose. then the mouth. After that, I start working on the rest of the face. I work bit by bit, area by area. This method may seem slow, but it's incredibly effective. The first layer is always the longest part of the process, but once it's done, the following layers come together much more easily. I keep the paint thin, spreading it out gently, focusing on getting the right tone and making sure the overall structure is there. Now that the face is done, I move on to the hair area, which for me is always quite a relaxing part of the process. At this stage, the first layer, I'm mainly focusing on establishing the middle and dark values. I'm not thinking about detail just yet. A common mistake when painting hair, especially for those just starting out, is trying to paint every single strand individually. It might seem like that's the way to achieve realism, but in fact, it usually makes the hair look overly busy or unnatural. The real key to painting hair in a realistic way is to group strands together, visually simplify them into larger shapes. Think of the hair not as millions of lines, but as flowing ribbons or blocks of form, each with their own value. These groupings help create the illusion of volume and movement, and they allow you to focus on the bigger picture, how the light falls across the surface, where the shadows collect, and how the highlights emerge. By separating the hair into sections of middle and dark values, I can lay a strong foundation before going into detail in later layers. As for the brush, I'm using a flat brush here, and I find it works brilliantly for this kind of work. It can make clean, thin, elongated marks that feel very natural for hair flow. Some artists prefer a liner brush or a rigger brush for individual strands, and those can be useful in the final detailing stages. But at this point, I think the flat brush gives me far more control for shaping the hair masses and laying down directional strokes. It also helps me resist the temptation to get caught up in too much detail too early. The main thing is to let the brush follow the direction of the hair, to mimic the natural curve and rhythm, but without over-defining it. Once I've established these larger shapes and transitions, I'll be able to come back in the next layers with more refined strokes, softening some parts and sharpening others, to really bring the hair to life. But here, it's all about structure, laying down that first layer of grouped value and form to guide the painting later on. Now, a key part of my approach, and something that I've come to really enjoy over time, is finding the right balance between two very different painting styles. One that's tight and highly controlled, and another that's loose, expressive, and almost abstract in places. You can already see that the face in this portrait is painted quite tightly. It's detailed, almost photographic, in the way it captures the light, the subtle transitions in the skin, the structure beneath. I love spending time on this part of the painting because it gives the subject a real sense of presence. When the face is rendered with that much care and precision, it draws you in. It becomes the emotional center of the piece, and it anchors everything else. I always want the viewer's attention to go straight to the face, and so I put most of my effort there. But once I move on to other areas, like the hair, the background, and the clothes, I begin to loosen up. This is a very intentional choice. I don't want the entire canvas to be rendered with the same intensity. I find that if every part of the painting is tightly painted, it can start to feel a bit heavy or overly polished, almost too still. It loses some of that magic that makes painting such a joy. So instead, I embrace a more painterly approach in these parts. I allow the brushwork to show. I let the colours blend more freely. The strokes are less about perfection and more about gesture, about movement and suggestion rather than description. There's something very freeing about that. For me, this contrast, the harmony between the realistic and the expressive, is what makes the painting feel alive. It adds rhythm, visual interest, and depth. The viewer's eye naturally lingers on the face, but then it can travel around the canvas, exploring these softer, looser areas that feel more open and interpretive. It's a way of telling the viewer, this is where I want your attention, while still inviting them to enjoy the rest of the composition. I think it also mirrors how we see the world in real life. We don't focus on every single detail at once. Our eyes pick out what matters most, and the rest becomes part of the atmosphere. And honestly, I find it really fun. This mixture of precision and freedom keeps the process exciting. It means I get to enjoy the discipline of realism and the spontaneity of painterly expression in the same piece. It's that balance that keeps me coming back to the canvas, because no two paintings ever feel the same, even when I'm following the same method. There's always room to push, to explore, to decide how much to say and how much to leave open. That's what makes painting so rewarding for me. Now that the main subject is complete, before I move on to developing the background, I like to take a moment to step back and assess the painting as a whole. This is usually the point where I begin what I call the second layer. It's not about repainting the entire piece or making dramatic changes, quite the opposite actually. This stage is all about subtlety. I look for small mistakes, little things that might be slightly off in colour, value or shape. Details that might not stand out immediately, but still feel a bit distracting or incomplete to me. These corrections are quiet but important, and they help to bring the whole painting into harmony. During this second layer, I don't feel the need to cover every inch of the surface with fresh paint. If an area looks fine, if the colour is working, the value feels right, and the brushwork has a nice texture, I simply leave it alone. There's no point in painting over something that already works. In fact, I think part of painting well is knowing when to stop. It's very tempting to keep going, to keep refining, but too much fussing can actually take the life out of a painting. So I try to be mindful. I only paint where it feels necessary. Some parts of the painting might only receive a single layer, while others might have 2, 3, or even more. And that's completely fine. The way I think about it is like building a pyramid. At the base, you cover more area. This is your first layer, which lays the foundation. As you move up, each additional layer becomes smaller, more selective, more focused. You're not starting over with every new layer. You're simply building on top of what's already there, refining and improving only where it's needed. This kind of layering brings depth and richness, especially in the areas that matter most. One of the benefits of layering is that it lets you make mistakes without ruining the whole piece. If you don't get something quite right on the first layer, you can go back, add more layers, and fix it. With the first layer in place, I'm already starting to see the depth, but it's still a long way from finished. Each layer builds on the last, bringing more richness and detail to the piece. In this section, I'm repainting her cheek once again because I still feel it's not quite smooth enough. This is one of the benefits of working in layers. The more layers you apply to a specific area, the smoother and more refined it becomes. With each pass, you can gently correct and enhance what's already there, without disturbing the underlying work. If you're aiming for a very polished, smooth look like I am, where there are no visible brushstrokes, the technique you use becomes really important. The key is to use a soft synthetic brush instead of a bristle brush. Synthetic brushes allow you to spread the paint more evenly and delicately, which is exactly what you need for blending skin tones smoothly. I also make sure to apply the paint very thinly and evenly across the surface. Another important tip, don't jump from a dark value to a lighter value using the same brush. Always wipe your brush clean before switching colours or values. This prevents the previous colour from contaminating the new mix and helps maintain clarity in your transitions. It's a small step, but it makes a big difference in achieving that clean, smooth finish. And for the dark areas, I deepen the value using a technique called glazing. Glazing is when I mix very thin, transparent paint with liquin. This mixture creates an even more translucent layer that builds depth, especially in the shadow areas. I'm not using a different colour here, I'm just reapplying the same tones I've already mixed. The beauty of glazing is how it deepens the shadows and adds richness to the colours, all while keeping the process very controlled. I apply the glaze especially to the darkest areas where I want to enhance the depth. This technique is wonderful for portraits because it creates a rich, deep darkness that's very difficult to achieve with the alla prima method. To me, glazing feels incredibly satisfying, so here's a real-time clip of me glazing some sections of the hair. As I near the end of the painting, I find myself reflecting on the process. Oil painting for me is a meditative experience. Time feels like it goes faster when I'm painting. I get lost in it, and hours can pass without me even realizing. The process doesn't feel like a struggle for me, it's a flow, it's calming for my mind. The act of painting itself is a way for me to center myself, to enjoy the process of creation without worrying too much about the outcome. I think that's one of the reasons I love oil painting more than charcoal. Charcoal can be expressive and quick, but oil painting feels like I'm building something slowly, layer by layer. It's more satisfying, especially because it's in color. And while it does take longer to finish one piece, I don't mind. I hope, after watching this, you'll feel encouraged to try oil painting yourself. It's a wonderful, accessible medium, and once you understand the layering process, you'll see how forgiving it can be. Just remember, take your time, enjoy the journey, and let the painting evolve at its own pace.